She posted a story. Why do guys always want to know where you are? So controlling. I screenshot it and sent it to her mom with. Tell her I won't be asking anymore. 3 hours later, her mom was calling begging to talk this through. I, 27M, thought I had found the one. We'd been together for 2 years, living together for 8 months, and I genuinely believed we were building something real. She was smart, funny, and we clicked on so many levels. But there was this one thing that kept gnawing at me. The way she'd get defensive whenever I asked simple questions about her day or where she was going. It started small. I'd ask what her plans were for the evening, and she'd give me this look like I was interrogating her. When I'd text asking if she wanted me to pick up dinner on my way home from work, she'd respond hours later with something vague about already eating. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe she just valued her independence. I respected that. I wanted to respect that. But then came that Tuesday evening that changed everything. I was scrolling through Instagram while she was in the shower when her story notification popped up. The bright pink text against a black background hit me like a punch to the gut. Why do guys always want to know where you are? So controlling face with rolling eyes like mind your own business. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of it. This was about me. It had to be. I'd asked her that morning if she wanted to grab lunch together since I had a break between meetings. Such a simple question, and apparently, it made me controlling. I screenshot the story without thinking, my hands moving faster than my brain. The betrayal felt like ice water in my veins. Here I was, trying to be a good boyfriend, wanting to spend time with her, include her in my day, and she was painting me as some possessive monster to her hundreds of followers. I sat there on our couch, in our apartment, staring at this public humiliation. None of her followers knew who she was talking about, but I knew. And suddenly, every defensive response, every rolled eye, every time she'd made me feel like I was asking too much for simply caring about her day, it all made sense. That's when I remembered her mom. Her mother had always been kind to me. She'd welcomed me into their family, always asked about my work, remembered details about my life. She'd even mentioned once how happy she was that her daughter had found someone who genuinely cared about her. The irony wasn't lost on me now. I opened my messages and found her mom's contact. My finger hovered over her name for a long moment. Was this petty? Maybe. Did I care anymore? Not really. I attached the screenshot and typed. Tell her I won't be asking anymore. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The shower was still running. I could hear her humming some song, completely oblivious to the fact that her world was about to shift. I felt this strange calm wash over me, like when you finally make a decision you've been avoiding for months. 20 minutes later, she emerged from the bathroom in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel, looking relaxed and content. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and started scrolling, probably checking if anyone had responded to her story. I watched her face, waiting for the moment she'd realize what had happened. It took exactly 3 hours. I was in the kitchen making dinner when her phone started buzzing. First a text, then another, then it started ringing. I could hear her voice from the living room, getting progressively more panicked as she realized her mom was calling. She answered on the 4th ring, and I could hear her mother's voice through the phone, though I couldn't make out the words. What I could hear was my girlfriend's tone shifting from casual to confused to defensive to something approaching panic. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes before she hung up and came rushing into the kitchen. Her face was pale, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, maybe, or the realization that actions have consequences. She told me her mom wanted to talk to both of us, that there had been some kind of misunderstanding. She kept asking what I had sent her mother, how her mom even had my number, why I would go behind her back like that. The questions came rapid fire, and I could see her trying to piece together what had happened. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot. Her face went white as she recognized her own words, her own story, now captured permanently and shared with the one person whose opinion mattered most to her. She tried to explain that it wasn't about me, that she was just venting about guys in general, that she'd had a frustrating day and wasn't thinking clearly. But we both knew that wasn't true. She tried to say it was just a story, that social media posts don't mean anything, that I was overreacting. I asked her if she really thought wanting to know where your partner was going was controlling. If asking about her day made me possessive. If caring enough to want to include her in my life was something worth publicly mocking. She couldn't answer that. Instead, She kept asking why I'd involved her mother, why I'd screenshot a private story, why I couldn't have just talked to her about it directly. She made it sound like I was the one who had violated her trust. That's when it hit me how backwards this whole relationship had become. I was apologizing for caring. I was walking on eggshells around someone who was supposed to love me. I was being made to feel guilty for wanting basic communication and partnership. Her phone buzzed again. Another call from her mom. This time, her mother's voice was different when she answered. Firmer. I could hear her asking pointed questions about how she'd been treating me, whether she understood how hurtful that post was, how embarrassed she was that her daughter would publicly complain about someone who clearly cared about her. The call lasted longer this time, maybe 15 minutes. I continued making dinner, listening to one side of a conversation that was clearly not going well for my girlfriend. I heard a lot of, but mom, and you don't understand, and it's not that simple. When she finally hung up, she looked defeated. She told me her mom wanted to meet with both of us the next evening, that she was disappointed and wanted to understand what was really going on in our relationship. She said her mother had asked some hard questions about how she'd been behaving, whether she appreciated what she had, whether she understood that good men don't grow on trees. That night was tense. She kept oscillating between being angry at me for tattling to her mother and trying to smooth things over, insisting that we could work through this without involving family. She suggested we skip the meeting with her mom, that we could handle this ourselves like adults. But I realized I didn't want to handle it ourselves anymore. I was tired of being made to feel like I was asking for too much when all I wanted was basic respect and communication. I was tired of walking on eggshells around someone who thought caring about her was controlling. I told her we were going to that meeting. Update 1. The meeting was at her parents' house the next evening. I'd been there dozens of times before, but this felt different. Her father answered the door with a tight smile and a firm handshake, and I could tell her mother had filled him in on everything. Her mom had printed out the screenshot. Seeing those words on paper somehow made them even worse. She placed it on the coffee table between us like evidence in a trial, which, in a way, it was. Her mother started by asking her daughter to explain what she meant by the post. Not to me, but to her parents. She wanted to understand why her daughter thought it was appropriate to publicly mock someone who cared about her, why she thought basic communication in a relationship was controlling behavior. My girlfriend tried the same explanations she'd given me the night before. It wasn't about me specifically, she was just frustrated. Social media posts don't mean anything real. But her mother wasn't buying it any more than I had. Her mom asked her to think about her father, about how he'd always checked in on her when she lived at home, how he'd want to know her plans not to control her, but because he cared about her safety and wanted to be part of her life. She asked if that made her father controlling too. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Her father looked hurt, and I could see my girlfriend realizing that her blanket statement about guys being controlling had just insulted the man who'd raised her with nothing but love and concern. Then her mother turned to me and asked how long this had been going on. I found myself explaining months of walking on eggshells, of having normal relationship questions treated like invasions of privacy, of feeling like I had to apologize for caring about her day or wanting to make plans together. Her parents exchanged looks that said everything. They'd raised their daughter better than this, and they knew it. Her mother asked her daughter directly, did she think I was controlling? Did she think wanting to know if she'd be home for dinner was unreasonable? Did she think asking about her day was possessive behavior? For the first time, my girlfriend seemed to really think about these questions instead of just reacting defensively. She admitted that maybe she'd been unfair, that maybe she'd been too sensitive about normal relationship communication. But then her mother asked the question that changed everything. Do you even want to be in this relationship? The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. My girlfriend looked at me, then at her parents, then down at the screenshot on the table. When she finally spoke, she said she didn't know anymore. Her mother nodded like she'd been expecting that answer. She told her daughter that if she wasn't sure, then she needed to figure it out, but that she couldn't keep stringing along someone who clearly loved her while publicly mocking him for caring. Her father finally spoke up, saying that he'd always liked me, that he could see how much I cared about his daughter, and that it broke his heart to see me being treated like my feelings didn't matter. That's when my girlfriend started crying. Not the angry tears from our fight the night before, but something deeper. She said she'd been feeling trapped lately, not by me, but by the idea of settling down, of becoming domestic, of losing her independence. She said she'd been taking it out on me instead of dealing with her own fears about commitment. Her mother asked if that was fair to me. If it was fair to make me feel like a monster for wanting a normal, communicative relationship while she worked through her commitment issues. My girlfriend said no, it wasn't fair. Update 2. We left her parents' house that night with a lot to think about. The car ride home was quiet, both of us processing what had happened. I could tell she was embarrassed by her parents' disappointment, but also maybe seeing our relationship clearly for the first time in months. Over the next few days, we had some of the most honest conversations we'd ever had. She admitted that she'd been feeling panicked about our relationship getting more serious, about moving in together, about the expectations that came with being part of a couple. Instead of talking to me about these fears, she'd been pushing back against anything that felt like couple behavior, including basic communication. She said she'd started to see my questions about her day or her plans as evidence that she was losing her independence, that she was becoming half of a unit instead of her own person. She realized how unfair that was, how she'd been punishing me for her own internal struggles. I told her I understood being scared about commitment, but that shutting me out and making me feel like a controlling boyfriend wasn't the solution. I explained how lonely I'd felt in our relationship, how I'd started second-guessing every text, every question, every attempt to connect with her. We both acknowledged that we'd let this pattern go on too long. She'd been building resentment against normal relationship expectations, and I'd been accepting less than I deserved because I was afraid of losing her. The hardest conversation was about whether we could fix this. She asked if I could forgive her for the public humiliation, for making me feel unwanted in my own relationship. I asked if she could commit to working through her fears instead of taking them out on me. We decided to try couples counseling. She found a therapist who specialized in commitment issues and communication problems. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where we both wanted to walk out, where old patterns tried to resurface, where we had to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and each other. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when the therapist asked her to imagine how she'd feel if I posted something publicly mocking her for caring about me. She'd never flipped the script before, never considered how it would feel to have someone you love portray your affection as annoying or controlling to an audience of strangers. She cried in that session, really understanding for the first time how deeply she'd hurt me. Not just with the post, but with months of making me feel unwelcome in my own relationship. The therapist also helped me understand that I'd been enabling the pattern by constantly accommodating her pushback instead of addressing it directly. I'd been so afraid of seeming controlling that I'd stopped advocating for my own needs in the relationship. We learned to have the conversations we should have been having all along. About boundaries and expectations, about independence within a partnership, about the difference between healthy interdependence and codependency or control. Update 3. 6 months later, we're in a much better place. The counseling helped us develop tools for communicating about difficult topics before they become relationship-threatening issues. She's learned to recognize when her fear of commitment is driving her behavior, and I've learned to address problems directly instead of hoping they'll resolve themselves. She deleted that Instagram story, but more importantly, she made a point of posting positive things about our relationship when she felt moved to do so. Not performatively, but genuinely sharing moments of happiness and gratitude. It meant a lot to see her publicly acknowledge that she valued what we had together. Her relationship with her parents is stronger now too. They've had honest conversations about her fears around commitment and independence, and they've helped her understand that being in a loving relationship doesn't mean losing yourself. It means finding someone who supports who you are while building something together. The screenshot incident became a turning point for us. Not because public humiliation is ever the right way to handle relationship problems, but because it forced us to confront issues we'd both been avoiding. It made her realize how her behavior was affecting someone she loved, and it made me realize I deserved better than walking on eggshells in my own relationship. We still have moments where old patterns try to creep back in. Sometimes she still feels a knee-jerk resistance to what she perceives as couple expectations, and sometimes I still hesitate to ask for what I need because I'm afraid of seeming demanding. But now we have tools to recognize these moments and address them constructively. Her mother still brings up that evening sometimes, usually when she wants to remind her daughter how important it is to appreciate the people who love you. It's become family shorthand for not taking good relationships for granted. Looking back, I don't regret sending that screenshot to her mom. It wasn't the most mature way to handle the situation, but it was the catalyst we needed for honest conversations that were long overdue. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to help you see patterns you've become blind to. We're talking about moving to a bigger place together next year, and for the first time, those conversations don't feel fraught with tension about independence versus commitment. We've learned that healthy relationships aren't about losing yourself in another person. They're about choosing to build something together while maintaining your individual identities. The most important thing I learned is that love isn't enough if it's not accompanied by respect and communication. You can care about someone deeply while still treating them poorly, often without even realizing you're doing it. Real love requires being willing to examine your own behavior and make changes when you realize you're hurting someone you care about. And sometimes, it takes a screenshot and a disappointed mother to help you see what you've been missing all along. Please subscribe and click on the hype button.